In the outer reaches of Chicagoland stands many boroughs, suburbs, and lesser towns, many of which still retain a mall. However, that might not last much longer as malls drop like flies this year. While I missed the Spring Hill Mall, I was able to catch the Stratford Square Mall, which closed shortly after my visit. Opened by Urban Investment and Development Company in March 9, 1981, the two-floor Stratford Square Mall would grace the region of Bloomingdale with Marshall Field's, Carson Perry Scott, Montgomery Ward, and Wiebolt stores as its original anchors. Pardon if I mispronounced that last one. At the time, Stratford Square Mall was practically in the middle of a field with only the crossroads being upgraded to what we see today. In fact, it would take a long time before suburban sprawl would catch up with the mall, as only a few rural hoods existed at the time, while the suburban sprawl was east of the nearby golf course. However, the mall did have its very own quirk to draw shoppers in, a center within a center named the Festival Court, which was meant to contain a myriad of stores, restaurants, and a 4-screen theater. It would also feature a glass elevator, terraced waterfall, and a large water feature designed to look like something from a marsh. Are there any pictures of that out there? Although it wouldn't be until 1988 when suburban sprawl would start to spread around the Stratford Square Mall, the mall did at least have a start and would have carved a niche for itself. However, as it was getting off the ground, it would be involved in a rather bizarre theft spree early on. In February 1984, a Roman Catholic priest would go on a burglar rampage that would go on for several hours. The spree started off at the Woodfield Mall, where the priest robbed 7 stores. He would then proceed to Stratford Square Mall's Marshall Field store, where he would be caught with upwards of 100 items. Loss prevention would detain the priest, and he, along with an accomplice whom was a 60-year-old woman, would be arrested and charged with felony theft and felony possession. At the cost of sounding like a dork, that sounds like a really bad Dungeons & Dragons character arc. That was just one of 3 unique stories involving the mall. The second involves a disastrous acid spill in 1990. A massive carboy container containing a dilute mixture of sulfuric acid and a little phosphoric acid would tumble out of a truck making a delivery at the mall. Roughly 100 gallons were lost, spilling into the sewers and being picked up by the air intakes of Marshall Fields. If you know anything about acid, even the fumes can be dangerous, which resulted in the hospitalization of 15 employees. Fortunately, no deaths were reported and all the employees made a recovery. Considering how endemic unsecured loads are, especially today, it's a wonder these don't happen more often. The third unique story is a lot more grim, however, and, well, that one can wait. We'll come back to it later. Over the course of the 80s and 90s, things would start to change. Suburban sprawl was starting to go up around the mall, and new shopping centers were being established west and south of Stratford Square, cementing the local area as a retail corridor. Wieboldt's would close in 1987 and would be filled in by JCPenney in 1988. A department store called Main Street would open its doors in 1985, before falling into financial decline and being largely bought out by Kohl's in 1988, which led to Kohl's taking over operations in 1989. However, as we enter the 90s, competition would heat up, and Woodfield Mall would have completed a renovation in 1996, bringing in new stores and a new wing that would connect to the Nordstrom. While Stratford Square Mall saw an expansion in 1991 that brought in Sears, This was not going to be enough to compete against Woodfield Mall, which was seen as the top dog of the region. Stratford Square Mall finally responded in 1998 and would complete a renovation by the end of 1999. This would bring in many improvements, from new floors, escalators, and elevators, to more and larger bathrooms and expanded retail space. Even new water features were included in this renovation. Unfortunately, these would be ripped out a few years later due to costly maintenance and persistent leaks. However, would all of this be enough? Because things seemed rather turbulent over the 2000s. Montgomery Ward would close up in 2001, although by that point the entire company was closing. And the space would be filled in by Burlington Coat Factory in 2002. The original Plitt Theaters would close in 2005, but would reopen in 2007 as Cinemark Century. Marshall Fields? Nope, not anymore. They would turn over to Macy's in 2006. Steve & Barry's would also be present at the mall from 2006 to 2009, and the ownership of the mall? Well, in 2005, Feldman Mall Properties based out of New York would acquire the mall, but in 2014, Street Mac LLC would acquire the mall. And speaking of, the 2010s were going to be bad for this mall. JCPenney would shut its doors for the last time in 2014, while Macy's would close in 2017. It wasn't 100% bad news, however, as Round 1 would open up in the Carson's wing of the mall in 2015. But then, in 2018, Carson's parent company, the Bon-Ton, would file bankruptcy, and the company would be forced to liquidate all assets, including Carson's, leading to its inevitable death in 2018. And in 2019, Namdar would acquire the mall. Although on a lighter note, several film projects were conducted at the mall, which included scenes for the show Righteous Gemstones, Somebody Somewhere, and Chicago Fire. Even a commercial for the Illinois State Lottery was filmed in the mall. Now let's talk about the third incident at the mall, which is a lot more grim, as I've mentioned before. In June 2018, a shooting had broken out in the parking lot by Burlington, which resulted in the serious injury of two. One being a loss prevention officer, and the other would have been wounded in the hand and shoulder. The suspect would be apprehended and charged with possession of a weapon by a felon, because of course it's a repeat offender, and aggravated battery with a firearm. The suspect would be sentenced to 6 years in prison on 2019. And if that wasn't enough, I was doing a little more research and found out that a jewelry store would be robbed in 2023 by two people wielding a gun and a hammer. Man, I'm starting to have the wrong idea about Bloomingdale. Oh, hey Chicago, I didn't see you over there. Things were not improving. In 2018, Woodnom's Food Market would receive approval to demolish the former Macy's building to build a new supermarket. However, as a sign of things to come, there would be no mall access to speak of. Meanwhile, stores were emptying out, most due to lagging sales and traffic, but also a few due to disputes with Namdar. Round 1 would close in 2020, and Burlington Coat Factory would close in 2023. And speaking of, Namdar would come under legal fire as calls to redevelop the dead mall grew and grew, and their lack of care for the mall's longevity became apparent. No tax write-off for you. Enter 2024, and the village of Bloomingdale would succeed as the lawsuit was settled. Namdar would agree to surrender their property and would officially close the mall on April 15. Kohl's will remain, but will they be in any visions for the property's future? Time will tell, but here, Stratford Square Mall's story as we know it is now coming to an end. Take a good long hard look at it, because you won't see it again. Bad for Stratford Square. Until next time, Bloomingdale, this is Doomie Grunt wishing you and the Stratford Square Mall farewell.